September 21st, 2024. Well, I'm going to talk mainly on this video about some of the situations in the Ukraine war and the kind of the nuclear issue that's being floated. But before I get into that, I do want to do a few comments about the election because I think that's a thing that's always on people's minds. And in the last video, I mentioned that we were that Harris was up 1.7% on the Real Clear Politics average, and then she peaked at about 2 and then fell back to 1.9. So it's pretty stable. I think she's kind of peaked in my opinion with the debate, and it was that gave her a little bit more than we expected. I was hoping it would go the other way after the debate, but well, we've been through that. The good news, I think, is that in the Rasmussen poll, we're still holding up 2% lead, and I consider that to be probably one of the most reliable polls out there. Weirdly enough, most people don't seem to pay much attention to it, which is kind of interesting. But nonetheless, but if you want to look at something else, the pre-debate and post-debate in the New York Times Siena, which I mean, Harris went up 1%. From being dead even to, I think, up 1% in that poll, which is a solid liberal source, I think. So, you do have crazy things like the Morning Consult, which has her up 6%, but she only gained like 1% also during the debate. So one thing, even the polls I consider not that good or having a bias, you have to consider that you want to look at whether they're useful to you is to look at, before a major event and then after a major event to see what the impact is. I mean, the impact, the relative might might be more meaningful than the absolute on those kind of things. And what I do find to be a bit paradoxical on that is when you look at the battleground polls, which are almost overall average out almost a dead even. I think Harris up, I think a tenth. Is that it, or is it Trump up? At any rate, that seems to be out of line. If in fact they're, let's say, dead even nationally, it's hard to see how the battleground states would be also dead even, because we know there are vast groups of voters, as I mentioned before, in places like California, New York, Illinois, and then some of the other fairly liberal states out there in an aggregate, where we know that with almost certainty, unless some kind of a miracle happens, the Democrat wins big. And so if you take those millions of extra Democrat votes, then it doesn't seem likely that something like that be happening in all the battleground states. So anyway, so that's kind of my rundown on that. I think that she had a rather underperformance, I think, in her celebrity-studded Oprah Winfrey town hall, sounding incoherent on key issues and so forth, as always. And the one question nobody asked her, what kind of gun do you own? Come on, really. But anyway, enough of that. I thought it'd be good as an intro for people interested in the election, of course. But I want to get on to my main topic here, is back to the Ukraine war and the nuclear issue that's been raised. So anyhow, one thing we want to look at is, what is afoot? Well, I think maybe this has been alleviated, at least for the short term, because we were all set up for this idea of these strikes into Russia, deep into Russia, using U.S. and maybe British weapons. And everybody was all set up for this. And the British Prime Minister was flying to Washington to meet with Biden on this. And what happened apparently is the Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense and National Security Advisor kind of ganged up and said, no, this is not a good thing to do. There could be some bad complications from it. And so apparently 2 hours before the Prime Minister of England got here, they put out a thing that we weren't going to go that way, and apparently we didn't. So for the moment, apparently this is kind of offline. The thing that's holding Britain back, of course, is that there's U.S. components in the Storm Shadow missile, and also I think they may need U.S. intelligence to do the targeting. And so that kind of leaves it, as long as we're saying no, it doesn't happen, I guess. And so, at any rate, however, they did use one of their own drones or multiple drones, I'm not sure which, to blow up a major Russian ammo depot, and that's created some, issues. So anyway, that's kind of where we are on the issue of that for the moment. By the way, if you like my videos, please give me a like. I always appreciate that. It helps with the algorithm. You can, if you're on YouTube, you can click the bell for notifications, and of course subscribe. And of course, if you're not, if you're on Rumble, you can follow me there and subscribe there. So at any rate, so the issue then may be mitigated for the short term, although the Russians were really pressing hard on this. And it's interesting, what were they really thinking of doing, and what seems to be afoot, and how did that maybe affect the Defense Department and the National Security Advisor's thinking? And one thing seems most likely, they were actually thinking about doing a nuclear test. And remember, the British have been big on trying to suggest that Russian nuclear weapons really won't work. I don't know why they would think that. Don't everybody else? I mean, I do grant in historic testing, when they were developing new bombs, and they were pressing the technology to new levels, sometimes you did have failures, things that underperformed or didn't really detonate. But I think these are established weapons that have been in the inventory, and unlike a lot of the mythologies, they're not all that old. I mean, the Iskander is a relatively new missile. It's post-Soviet by many years. And I assume the warheads on them are new also. Did they put some old bomb on the thing? I doubt it. So I think they probably will work. But anyway, the test is just to demonstrate that, and that maybe, when people actually were testing these bombs, people got really nervous about it. People saw pictures of how the explosions. I'm not sure if they're going to do an underground test or an open air test. I mean, but so that can have an impact, and I think that makes it look more real than if you're just talking. Now, and the other thing that would happen is that would be violating the Test Ban Treaty, of course. We have both the Test Ban Treaty and then the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, right? That you won't do any actual nuclear tests. So now, if they did that, that poses another issue. If Russia does a test, then do we feel that we need to do one too? And I presume the Biden administration doesn't want to go back to testing. And when does that loosen up China to do its tests? Maybe they would like to do a few tests, but I mean, their systems are not as verified as the other countries are historically. And although they do have stolen designs of our weapons, we know that. Although we don't know who the spy was, we know it's not Wen Ho Lee. If you want to go look that case up, but it's somebody that did. And so, but they might want to actually have, that might be useful to them too. So we don't know where this would go to if that occurred. It wouldn't necessarily be a catastrophe, but it would be a setback foreign policy wise, I think. And so that alone might lead to a situation where we wouldn't want it to occur. That would be far less than actually using one of these things in warfare, of course. And of course, that's been discussed. One idea has been detonating one in space to create an EMP effect on satellites and probably on the ground too. And of course, the idea of maybe some sort of a conventional attack of some escalatory nature, or perhaps providing weapons to a third party to do something against our interests. And we do know that this Houthis managed to fire a ballistic missile into Israel recently. So I think that kind of runs through the possibilities. But at any rate, apparently the Defense Department is not keen on this. And the other aspect is I don't think they want to give up that many more of their missiles. I mean, they don't think it will really be effective in actually changing the outcome. It might agitate Russia to do something we don't want them to do. And it's kind of futile, it seems like. And by the way, since we're on the topic of the Ukraine war, it looks like the Russian counteroffensive has been gaining ground in the Kursk region. And there's a real danger that the Ukrainian units might get cut off, or they better start retreating pretty fast. And we'll see how that plays out. I know the attack on the munitions dump might have been designed to slow the Russian offensive up, because it was like the closest major munition supply, I guess, to the northern group of forces, as it's called. And anyway, so that's an ongoing situation. And Putin did say when they would do something about the situation, he said October. So that's about a week away. So, in a few days from when this is being recorded. So I think that maybe this is coming true. We'll see how that goes. And of course, the big sad thing for Ukraine is they chewed up so much of their most effective forces that they used to plug the gaps when the Russians were making an advance and do the counterattacks. That now the Russian advances in the eastern area in the Donbass is kind of going ahead. It looks like Volodymyr is going to get eventually surrounded and cut off. And Pakrovsk, although it hasn't been attacked on the ground yet, is definitely under artillery and airstrikes and being damaged. So this is ongoing. And of course, we'll see if somebody gets some sense and tries to negotiate an end to this thing. But for the moment, it continues. So that's about the size of the situation here. I just thought I'd kind of go through all this. I do think that I see some of these people. I saw an interview on the Daniel Davis podcast where retired General Hodges was trying to say that almost under no situation would the Russians actually use a nuclear weapon. I think he's being a little naive on that. If they get pushed to where they're really losing bad, they might. But for the time being, that's been averted. So I'll be wrapping this up for now, and I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble, and the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below.